Mark Jean recently said that we are seeing Charles Leclerc 2.0 in this 2022 season, implying that the Monash driver has stepped up to a brand new level under these new regulations. And you have to say, it's so far so good for the Ferrari man. 2 podiums over the course of the first 2 races and a win in there as well. It looks like it is all going exceptionally well. I think the only problem that Charles Leclerc has right now is his title rival is current World Drivers' Champion Max Verstappen. And now, today I want to talk about whether or not I think Charles Leclerc can overcome Max Verstappen and what we've seen in these first 2 races, which makes me feel like Charles Leclerc could go on to win his first World Drivers' Championship. Now, of course, we're only 2 races in and there's a long, long way to go in this season and many twists in the tail. But so far what we've seen is 2 races where these 2 have gone wheel to wheel for the win on both occasions. In Bahrain, Leclerc even said it was hard racing, but I can also be an aggressive driver in the way that I fight with others. And I think for me, this was a clear statement of intent from Charles Leclerc. He was saying, you know, he can be that aggressive driver. He is willing to be the aggressor of the 2. And when it came down into Bahrain, the battle between the 2 of them, I think Charles Leclerc showed that aggression, but also so much intelligence, in my opinion. Obviously, the Red Bull had better straight line speed. That's been highlighted again in Saudi Arabia. But Charles Leclerc, defending down into turn 1, would intentionally push Max Verstappen over to that dirty side of the grid and compromise his turn through turn 1 and turn 2. And we know that Ferrari are better through those slow speed corners. And Charles Leclerc used that to massively his advantage. Not only did he push Max Verstappen off of the racing line, but he knew that the Ferrari was going to be better through turn 1 and through turn 2, leading on to that DRS zone down towards turn 4, picking up the DRS down towards turn 4, and actually being incredibly aggressive, cutting across Max Verstappen in what I would class as right on the limit of what we are allowed in Formula 1. You know, Max Verstappen had to really judge where Charles Leclerc was going to be and how Charles Leclerc was going to move. And I think that's exactly what we want to see between these 2, though, isn't it? Right on the limit, right on the edge. And I think there are going to be collisions between these 2, but so far, so good. And I think that shows that both of these drivers are incredibly intelligent. Both of them have a real racing acumen, but also they incredibly trust one another. Like, there is a clear understanding that neither of them wants to hit into the other, and they trust one another to get out of the way if the time comes for it. You know, Charles Leclerc even commentating after the race saying that he was braking early into turn 1 on purpose, and he would rather be in front of Max Verstappen going down in towards turn 4. So it's clear that these 2 understand one another. Obviously, they've been karting together since they were kids, but just knowing your enemy that little bit better, I think, works in Charles Leclerc's favour. I think it was premeditated, this move from Charles Leclerc. I think Charles Leclerc had an understanding of what he was expecting from Max Verstappen in this battle. Now, obviously, Leclerc has all of the information from last year. We've seen Max Verstappen much more at the front of these Grand Prix, battling for wins, and therefore, Charles Leclerc has a lot of data and insight into what Max Verstappen is going to do if he is pushed to the limit, if he is fighting for a win, if he is going wheel to wheel with him. And, you know, last year I think we saw the tactics between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, but both of them have been at the grid the front of the grid so often. They both had lots and lots of data. Charles Leclerc, I think, is being very tactical in how he's approaching these first 2 races. Charles Leclerc has clearly done his homework, and he knows the advantages of the Ferrari. He knows the advantages of the Red Bull. And as I said, you know, using that fact that the Ferrari is going to be better through those first 2 turns and knowing that he could get back at him down towards turn 4 is knowing the car and knowing your opponent incredibly well. Not only that, but we saw that again in Saudi Arabia. Yes, Max Verstappen again was the faster car through sectors 2 and 3. And down in towards turn 1, Charles Leclerc knew that he had to use that run to turn 13, that first sector in Saudi Arabia, to build out as much as a possible gap as he could, because the Verstappen and the Red Bull was going to come back at him towards the second half of that racetrack. And again, it's the evidence that Ferrari and Charles Leclerc know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly the advantages that this car has, and they know how to use that in each race and where to use those advantages in each race to get the most out of this in that battle between him and Max Verstappen. And now, moving into Saudi Arabia, again, it was another piece of really intelligent driving between the 2 of them. You know, we saw them going wheel to wheel again in Saudi Arabia, down in towards turn 1, not only at the start, but throughout the entire race as well. And Max Verstappen just loves a restart, doesn't he? Getting right up alongside the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, showing almost that he has that number one on the front of his car. And I think, you know, Max Verstappen loves being the aggressor here. He loves showing that he is there, he's willing to fight, and that he wants to get you down in towards that first corner as soon as the safety car comes in. And we saw that last year with Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Even in Abu Dhabi, some people saying that Max Verstappen jumped in front of Lewis Hamilton under the safety car, trying to get him done for maybe a little bit of a penalty or an overtake somewhere in there. You know, Max Verstappen is going to be as close to you as possibly can be. And Charles Leclerc actually played him at his own game a little bit. They were kind of outbreaking one another and stepping on each other's toes down towards that safety car line to where the race actually fully commences from. And Max Verstappen kind of got played at his own game, in my opinion. He was aggressive, and then Charles Leclerc was even more aggressive back. And we saw that not only then, but towards the end of the race with that DRS as well. You know, we saw them fighting fire with fire, slightly different to what we saw with Lewis Hamilton last year. You know, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, when it came to that incident last year, it was Lewis Hamilton that bumped into the back of Max Verstappen. This time we saw the two cars leading the race going side to side, going right down to that DRS line and almost trying to play chicken with one another, trying to outbreak one another. Charles Leclerc was like, no, I'm going to have the DRS down in towards turn one. Max Verstappen was trying not to give Charles Leclerc DRS down in towards turn one because he wanted that DRS. And then we just saw a click from Charles Leclerc and he just zoom off into the distance. Max Verstappen caught unawares by that, and he was trying to do that lap after lap after lap. Now, obviously, he wasn't able to continue that and keep the win under his belt. I think we'd have actually seen Charles Leclerc have another go at Max Verstappen later on in that race if it wouldn't have been for the yellow flags. But already we're seeing a different kind of battle between these two. Now, obviously, Max Verstappen lost out on the points in the first race in Bahrain, but already we're seeing a, as I said, fire with fire battle between these two. I think it's very different to what we saw with Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton last year. A lot of the time it was seen that Max Verstappen was the aggressor. Max Verstappen was the driver that was, you know, putting his limit on the line and was the one willing to almost cause a collision if necessary. Now, with that, Lewis Hamilton had to be the very cautious driver. Lewis Hamilton was more premeditated, more intelligent, kind of looked at the races slightly differently and was always, you know, getting those places back by either Lewis Hamilton had to be let back through by Max Verstappen because he'd overtaken off of the racing line, or Max Verstappen would pick up a penalty, or there would be contact between the two of them. Like, we saw that a lot of times with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, where Lewis had to be the more cautious of the two drivers. I genuinely think that Charles Leclerc is going to be as aggressive, if not more aggressive, than Max Verstappen this year. And I think because Charles Leclerc does have that slight advantage, I know it's a tiny advantage right now, just 20 points between the two of them, but because he has that slight advantage, he can be the more aggressive driver. I think that's what we saw from Max Verstappen last year. You know, if the two cars collided, Max Verstappen won the World Drivers' Championship. Like, he was able to be that aggressor. If Charles Leclerc can put himself in that position this time where he is the hunted and Max Verstappen now has to be the hunter, Max Verstappen now has to be the driver that has to overcome the other driver, we're going to see a completely different dynamic to Max Verstappen, and one that maybe he's not ready for a battle with. You know, I think it's a lot easier when you can be the more aggressive driver, especially for the likes of Max Verstappen that we've seen. You know, that is his driving style. That's where he's comfortable. He wants to be that driver on the front foot, putting the pressure on the other guy. Now it looks like Charles Leclerc is ready to be that guy putting the pressure onto Max Verstappen, and honestly, my expectation already between these two is that it's going to go all the way down to the wire. It's going to be incredibly close, and I think we're going to see proper wheel-to-wheel racing between these two. They love each other, they know each other, but they are going to do everything they possibly can to win a World Drivers' Championship. You know, we've seen that from Max Verstappen last year, and I genuinely think we're going to see a new aggressive side of Charles Leclerc. So first impressions from me, I think this is going to go all the way to the end of the season, but there's a long, long way to go. And of course, a Mercedes-shaped question mark as well for these two. You know, if Mercedes can sort out their problems and they can start to fight for those wins again rather than the 5th and 6th place, you know, suddenly you've got a Mercedes battling for 2nd or 1st place. Is that going to put a spanner in the works for these Red Bull and Ferrari teams, and whether or not they're going to be able to pick up the points that they need to properly overcome each other in the Drivers' Championship? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Whilst you're down there, leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel as well. More Formula 1 content coming, and of course the Australian live streams as well this weekend. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.